What about peak performance and flow state? I'm super interested in Formula One racing, driving at such speeds. I've never really interviewed anyone before that's worked with people at that level. I'm super curious to know about that mindset at those high speeds. And correct me if I'm wrong, but flow state is going to have to become even more important, as well as imagery and visualization. So tell me about your experience with working with these types of people, and tell me about your understanding of flow state for them.
Well, it was very useful to have worked with Dr. Jim Lair uh, since 1988, in which I went to Europe on a handshake, and I created his first European speaking tour. Then we went around the world, worked with uh, basically the best tennis generation in America ever. Sampras, Agassi, Seles, Courier, all of them. They got to number one in the world, and then uh, the understanding that there is an ideal performance state, that flow state can be described in very specific words by all these athletes. And Jim had interviewed over 440 athletes. So the coherence, the consistency of the definition was very important, because we looked then underneath the expressions and looked at the science. What's the physiology that creates this? Under which conditions? No? And of course, there is a physical way of accessing it, and there is an emotional and intellectual aspect to it. So, meaning the body is the tool, the pressure of the competition will generate certain responses. So pressure teaches the body to react in a way that will allow the adaptation to happen, and to enter that ideal performance state in which we are not really thinking, we are basically reacting in an instinctive way, but because we train for that, we are reducing the number of options. So it's much easier to operate that way. And emotionally is important because, like I mentioned before with the question, now is there an alternative? We can shift very quickly, very rapidly from one observation to another in milliseconds, to be able to either change the direction of a shot in tennis or make a move off the steering wheel in milliseconds as well, and with an accident or gain an advantage. To give you a comparison, we know from science that in tennis we react in 0.5 seconds average at the professional level. Well, my drivers react at 0.2. So it's much faster. Therefore, when you're training a mindset and behaviors and reactions, you need to keep that in mind as the playing field, and then investigate what's the physiology for them that they would call the ideal performance state, and any exercises, any adaptations come after that. No, I always ask, what are you actually doing? Then we look at what can be done better, differently, and more refined, because they have to be ready, let's say, based on the very strict schedule in the formula racing. Everything is timed. There are many people around you. They need to carve at least 10 minutes by themselves. Then other rituals come before they enter the car. Then other rituals when they're warming up the car. And then at the start. The start is critical, no?
Yep.
And then during the race, if something shakes them up, in milliseconds, get back into the state. So I would say, other than a fighter pilot or maybe a special forces individual, the drivers in Formula racing require the most attention to these factors because everything is so fast. No?
So what could someone from the business world learn from this being in flow state to close the deal? How can And how do you work with businesses with your coaching, leadership coaching, executive coaching, uh, to help them access flow state, and can they access it?
Yes, because if we take the speed away, the pressure remains. So there are four ways in which we react to pressure. One is walking away. I don't need this. I don't want to do it. I want to avoid the pressure. Then we might get angry because we know that it's important, but we might be angry at ourselves that we don't have the full capacity to do it. Or we're going to find a way to blame circumstances or other people, trying to protect our self-esteem. As we evolve as competitors or corporate athletes, we might choke at the opportunity because we cannot envision the next step, or the fear is too great, or we overanalyze. But with practice, if we overcome that, if we just take the risk, because I consider myself a learner, is not a pass or fail situation, is a yes and opportunity. I might learn to love the challenge, meaning I embrace every challenge as a learning opportunity. Give me more challenges, because the most important way of learning, I will keep score, the boss will keep score, but in a way I'm demonstrating that I use the same athletic principles that are evident to everybody in a sports arena, because again, the body is the tool. I'm training my physiology to adapt and respond in the most productive and desirable way.
Mm.